Today, we're looking at when deadly animals invaded weddings and mauled people, from a leopard ambush at a village celebration in India to a brown bear's rampage through a wedding in rural Siberia. But first, we begin on the shores of Uganda, where a nighttime lakeside reception was about to be torn apart by one of Africa's most dangerous animals. It was April 19, 2016, along the southwestern shore of Lake Victoria, where the rolling green hills of Uganda's lake region met the water in a patchwork of papyrus marshes and narrow beaches. A modest lakeside lodge had been reserved for the reception, its trimmed lawn stretching barely 60 feet from the main building to the water's edge. The location was prized for its sunset views across the lake. Katabarwa Gumisiriza, a 31-year-old agricultural extension worker, had spent nearly 2 years planning his wedding to his fiancée, a schoolteacher from a neighboring district. The couple had pooled savings and family contributions to host approximately 150 guests. Gumisiriza had visited the venue several times before booking, drawn to the open-air layout that let guests move freely between the covered dining area and the waterfront lawn. The lodge's owner had operated the venue for 7 years without incident, but local fishermen had warned staff on several occasions about hippos that grazed along the shoreline after dark, following established paths between the water and inland grazing grounds. One such path cut directly through the eastern edge of the lawn. The owner acknowledged the warnings but never altered the layout, reasoning that the noise from events would keep animals away. The ceremony had taken place that afternoon at a church 12 miles away. By evening, tables and chairs were arranged in a wide semicircle on the lawn, with the head table closest to the water. A generator-powered sound system filled the air with music. By nightfall, the celebration was in full swing. Guests danced between tables while caterers served from a buffet beneath the covered patio. Several elderly guests had settled into chairs along the eastern edge of the lawn, away from the noise. Beyond the generator-powered lights, the darkness was absolute, the moonless night rendering the shoreline and surrounding bush invisible. Hippopotamuses are among Africa's most dangerous large animals, responsible for an estimated 500 human deaths annually. Adult males commonly exceed 3,300 pounds, yet can reach speeds of 20 miles per hour on land, faster than most humans can sprint. Their enormous jaws open nearly 180 degrees, with canine teeth exceeding 16 inches, capable of crushing bone and inflicting catastrophic wounds. Hippos are fiercely territorial and inherently aggressive, particularly when their established movement routes between water and grazing areas are obstructed. The bull hippo that emerged from the lake that night was a dominant male that had used the same shoreline path for over a decade. Weighing an estimated 3,500 pounds, the animal had walked this route hundreds of times before the lodge existed. The grass on the eastern edge of the property still showed the faint depression of the ancient trail, now lined with plastic chairs and elderly wedding guests sitting in the dark. The first indication of danger came as a deep, resonant grunt from the darkness near the water. Guests nearest the shore initially mistook the sound for the generator struggling. Then the massive shape materialized at the edge of the light, already moving at speed, its enormous body barreling directly along its established route. The hippo did not deviate. It charged straight through the eastern edge of the reception, its path carrying it directly into the cluster of seated guests. An elderly woman was struck first, the animal's sheer mass sending her chair tumbling as its body clipped her. The impact threw her nearly 10 feet. Gumisiriza had been standing near the head table when the screaming started. He turned toward the commotion and stepped directly into the hippo's path as the animal thundered through the reception. The bull struck him with the full force of its momentum, its massive head catching him in the chest and abdomen. The impact launched him off his feet and sent him crashing into a row of tables. His ribs shattered on impact, the broken bones puncturing both lungs. The hippo continued its charge without stopping, crashing through tables and scattering guests into the darkness before disappearing into the bush beyond the lodge. The entire event lasted less than 20 seconds from first sighting to the animal vanishing. Guests converged on Gumisiriza, who lay motionless among the wreckage of overturned tables. Blood pooled beneath him as his breathing became shallow and irregular. The nearest medical facility was over 30 minutes away by vehicle, and the access road to the lodge was unpaved and poorly maintained. A vehicle was brought around, and Gumisiriza was loaded into the back seat. He stopped breathing during the drive. An elderly male guest who had been seated along the eastern lawn was found unconscious with massive blunt force injuries to his hip and torso. He died before reaching the same medical facility. Wildlife authorities investigated the following week. confirming the established hippo trail through the property. The lodge owner was cited for failure to implement adequate wildlife barriers. The venue was ordered closed pending safety modifications. The ancient trail was eventually fenced with heavy steel posts and concrete barriers, though the lodge never reopened for evening events. While Uganda's lakeside had claimed a groom and a guest in a matter of seconds, thousands of miles east in the highlands of Sri Lanka, another wedding celebration was about to collide with one of Asia's largest and most unpredictable animals. It was February 8, 2015, in the rural hill country of southeastern Sri Lanka, where dense jungle gave way to patchwork farmland carved from the forest over generations. The region had experienced increasing conflict between farming communities and wild elephants as habitat fragmentation pushed animals closer to settlements. Poorly maintained electric fences marked the boundary between cultivated land and a known elephant corridor. Ravindra Ekanayake, a 29-year-old tea plantation worker, was celebrating his wedding at his family's homestead, a modest compound surrounded by coconut palms and banana groves, approximately 300 yards from the nearest stretch of elephant corridor. Roughly 120 guests had gathered for the reception on cleared ground behind the main house. Caterers had been cooking since the previous evening, enormous pots of rice, curries, and sweets arranged across a long serving area. The scent of roasted spices and overripe bananas carried far in the still evening air. Generator-powered lights illuminated the property, and a sound system played music. The area's elephants had become increasingly bold in recent months. Several bulls had been raiding farms at night, breaking through deteriorating fences to reach crops. Wildlife officials lacked the resources to maintain corridor fencing. Villagers had grown accustomed to chasing elephants with firecrackers and noise, a strategy that worked on cautious animals, but only enraged those habituated to human deterrence. Asian elephants are the second largest land animals on Earth, with adult males weighing between 8,000 and 11,000 pounds, and standing up to 10 feet at the shoulder. While generally less aggressive than African elephants, solitary bulls can be highly unpredictable, particularly those habituated to raiding human food sources. An elephant's size grants it virtually unstoppable momentum when moving aggressively, capable of flipping vehicles, demolishing structures, and crushing humans underfoot. The bull elephant that approached the Ekanayake property that evening was a solitary male, estimated at roughly 9,000 pounds, well known to local wildlife officials for repeated fence breaches over the previous year. The animal had raided farms in the area at least a dozen times, developing an association between human settlements and accessible food. The first sign of the elephant's presence came when guests near the rear of the property noticed trees moving at the edge of the banana grove. The massive shape emerged from the darkness slowly at first, its trunk raised, testing the air saturated with the scent of prepared food. Several guests spotted the animal and began shouting, waving their arms. Rather than retreating, the bull lowered its head and moved toward the serving area with clear intent. Guests scrambled out of its path as the elephant reached the row of food tables, sweeping its trunk across the serving area and scattering pots, platters, and cooking equipment. The animal fed aggressively, shoveling food into its mouth while people fled. A group of men attempted the standard village response. They grabbed firecrackers, metal pots, and sticks, forming a loose semicircle and creating as much noise as possible to drive the animal back toward the jungle. The strategy had worked on other elephants dozens of times. This bull had been hazed by firecrackers before. Rather than retreating, the animal spun toward the group of men with terrifying speed. Its ears flared wide and its trunk curled upward as it charged. Darshana Wickremage, a neighbor who had been among the most aggressive in banging pots and shouting, was directly in the elephant's path. The bull struck him with its head, the impact lifting him off the ground and throwing him over 15 feet. He landed on hard-packed earth, his chest crushed by the collision. The elephant then turned sharply, its massive rear legs catching Wickremage as it pivoted. One foot came down on his torso with devastating force, collapsing his ribcage entirely. The bull continued its rampage through the reception area, overturning tables and demolishing a temporary wooden structure that had been erected to shelter the head table. Ekanayake had been trying to guide his bride and her family toward the main house when the elephant changed direction again. The animal's flank struck him as it turned, throwing him against a concrete wall. His left leg shattered below the knee, the bones splintering into fragments. The elephant spent several more minutes destroying the reception area before finally moving back toward the banana grove and disappearing into the darkness. The entire encounter lasted roughly 12 minutes. Wickremage was pronounced dead at the scene. His injuries were catastrophic and would not have been survivable with any amount of medical intervention. Ekanayake was transported by a neighbor's vehicle to a regional medical facility where surgeons fought to save his leg. Ultimately, the damage was too severe, and his left leg was amputated below the knee. Wildlife authorities arrived the following day, confirming the bull as the same animal responsible for numerous recent fence breaches. The animal was eventually captured and relocated to a national park in the north of the country. Local officials pledged to repair the corridor fencing, though residents expressed skepticism that the repairs would hold. While Sri Lanka's hill country had witnessed an elephant's fury across the Indian Ocean in the highlands of northern India, another outdoor wedding was about to be shattered by a very different kind of predator lurking in the darkness beyond the lights. It was November 3, 2017, in a small village in the Uttarakhand region of northern India, nestled in the foothills where dense sal forest climbed the lower slopes of the Himalayas. The area had experienced a sharp increase in leopard-human conflict over the preceding decade, as development encroached deeper into traditional forest habitat. Leopards had become regular visitors to the outskirts of villages, drawn by livestock and stray dogs. Tribhuvan Jyotishi, a 58-year-old retired schoolteacher, had spent months organizing the wedding of his eldest daughter, a 26-year-old nurse. Over 200 guests were expected across 2 days of festivities. The main reception was held on an open field adjacent to the family's property, bordered on two sides by dense forest barely 40 yards from the nearest tree line. The venue had been decorated with strings of lights, fabric canopies, and garlands of marigolds. Cooking stations along the field's western edge prepared food over wood fires, the smoke and scent of roasting meat drifting into the surrounding forest. As the reception stretched past midnight, the crowd thinned. Remaining guests clustered near the stage and central dining area, where the brightest lights were concentrated. The field's periphery had grown dark and quiet. Jyotishi had settled into a chair near the tree line to rest, largely alone, separated from the nearest guests by roughly 30 feet of darkness. Indian leopards are among the most adaptable large predators on Earth, thriving in close proximity to dense human populations. Adult males weigh between 130 and 170 pounds, with powerful jaws capable of crushing skulls and an ambush strategy that relies on stealth and explosive close-range attacks. Evidence later suggested the leopard had been lingering at the forest edge for some time, drawn by the scent of cooking meat, remaining concealed while the crowd was large. As the periphery emptied and grew dark, the lone seated figure at the field's edge presented an opportunity. Jyotishi had no warning. The leopard covered the distance from the tree line in seconds, striking from behind and above. Its jaws clamped onto the back of his head and neck, canine teeth tearing through his scalp and driving into the base of his skull while the bite compressed his cervical spine and throat. The impact knocked him from the chair and onto the ground, where the leopard maintained its suffocating grip, crushing the neck until he went still. Jyotishi's body was found beneath the overturned chair. Guests nearer to the stage initially heard nothing over the music. It was several minutes before someone noticed the overturned chair and the dark shape crouched over Jyotishi's motionless form. The screaming that followed sent the remaining crowd into a stampede toward the village road. The leopard, startled by the sudden surge of noise and movement, released its grip and bolted. But rather than retreating toward the tree line, the panicked animal ran directly into the fleeing crowd, seeking an escape route through the chaos. It collided with guests near the central dining area, lashing out with claws and teeth at anyone in its path. Jyotishi's daughter, the bride, was among those caught in the crush of fleeing guests. The leopard struck her across the face and shoulder as it tore past, its claws raking deep lacerations from her left temple down to her collarbone. The force of the blow knocked her to the ground, where she was nearly trampled by panicking guests before her husband dragged her to safety. The leopard escaped into the forest within seconds of entering the crowd. Behind it, the celebration had become a scene of devastation. Jyotishi was confirmed dead at the scene, the bite wounds to his head and neck having caused catastrophic damage. His daughter was transported to a regional medical facility in critical condition. Surgeons worked for several hours to close the deep lacerations across her face and shoulder. She survived, but was left with permanent scarring and partial loss of vision in her left eye. Wildlife officials arrived the following morning with tracking teams and tranquilizer equipment. The leopard was captured 2 days later in a cage trap baited with goat meat, approximately 3 miles from the village. The animal was relocated to a wildlife facility. The investigation noted the venue's proximity to dense forest cover and lack of any perimeter barriers as significant contributing factors. While India's forested highlands had cost a father his life at his own daughter's wedding, deep in rural Zimbabwe, another nighttime celebration was about to be invaded by a very different kind of predator, one that hunted not alone, but in numbers. It was September 27, 2014, in a remote farming settlement in Zimbabwe's Mashonaland West Province, where subsistence agriculture supported scattered communities connected by dirt roads that became impassable during the rainy season. The dry season had left the bush brown and brittle, with wildlife concentrated near remaining water sources. Tendai Maparanga, a 33-year-old cattle farmer, was hosting his wedding reception at his family's homestead compound. Over 80 guests had gathered, many having walked several miles to attend. The compound consisted of round thatched roof structures arranged in a semicircle around a central cleared area. Beyond it, open bush stretched in every direction, the nearest neighboring homestead over a mile away. The reception was planned as an all-night affair, with a slaughtered cow as the centerpiece of the feast. Butchering and cooking had taken place on-site throughout the day, with large quantities of raw meat, offal, and bones discarded in a waste pile approximately 50 yards from the gathering area. The blood and waste soaked into the dry earth, producing a scent that carried far in the still evening air. The settlement had experienced problems with hyenas for years. The animals regularly targeted livestock, and several calves had been taken in recent months. Villagers were accustomed to hearing their whooping calls at night and generally regarded them as a nuisance rather than a direct threat to humans. As midnight approached, guests danced around a large fire in the central area, while others rested on mats around the periphery. Several had drifted away to sleep in vehicles or outer structures. The fire and generator-powered lights illuminated the center, but left the compound's edges in near-total darkness. Spotted hyenas are among Africa's most formidable predators, with adult females weighing up to 140 pounds. Their jaws generate bite forces exceeding 1,100 pounds per square inch, the strongest relative to body size of any mammal, capable of crushing bone that lions cannot break. The waste pile had drawn at least 5 hyenas well before midnight. When the offal was consumed, they moved closer, drawn by the continued scent of cooked meat from the reception. The first attack occurred at the compound's edge, where a 62-year-old male guest named Pedzisai Chikawero had settled onto a grass mat to rest, away from the noise of the central fire. Based on how his body was later found, he had been lying on his side, his back facing the open darkness beyond the compound's outermost structure. The lead hyena approached from the darkness and bit into Chikawero's face and scalp, the massive jaws clamping down with enough force to fracture his cheekbone and tear away flesh. Chikawero's screams erupted across the compound, jolting the celebration into chaos. Rather than retreating at the noise, another hyena surged forward from a different direction, its dark shape weaving between structures. The fire still burned at the center, but the edges of the compound had become a maze of shadows and screaming. Chikawero attempted to crawl toward the nearest structure, but the second hyena latched onto his leg, its jaws crushing through muscle to the bone. The two animals tore into him simultaneously, one still gripping his face and scalp, while the other wrenched at his lower body, opening catastrophic wounds across his leg and hip. The assault lasted less than a minute before the animals were driven back by men rushing from the central fire with burning branches. The bride had been near the central fire when the chaos began. She fled toward the main house but was intercepted by a hyena that had circled behind the structures. The animal lunged at her legs, its teeth tearing through her calf muscle before she fell. Maparanga and 2 other men arrived with a vehicle, the headlights and engine noise finally scattering the hyenas into the bush. Chikawero was found in a massive pool of blood, his injuries devastating. The bites to his face and leg had caused catastrophic tissue loss and severed major blood vessels. He was loaded into a truck, but the nearest medical facility was over 2 hours away on dirt roads. He lost consciousness during the drive and was pronounced dead upon arrival. The bride was transported in a second vehicle, arriving at the same facility with severe bite wounds to her right calf and ankle. Surgeons managed to save her leg, though the muscle damage required months of rehabilitation and left her with a permanent limp. Wildlife officials confirmed the hyena clan had been habituated to the settlement through years of livestock predation and scavenging. The waste pile from the wedding butchering had drawn them into unusually close proximity to the gathering. Authorities recommended improved waste management and reinforced compound perimeters, though resources for implementation remained scarce. While Zimbabwe's bush had unleashed a coordinated assault on an entire wedding, far to the north in the forests of Siberia, one final celebration was about to meet a devastating intruder, drawn not by blood, but by the irresistible scent of a feast. It was July 14th, 2018, in a small timber settlement in the Krasnoyarsk region of central Siberia, where the taiga stretched endlessly in every direction, broken only by rivers and logging roads. The village of fewer than 300 residents was accessible only by a single unpaved road that connected to the nearest town over 40 miles away. Miroslav Chernikov, a 34-year-old logging equipment operator, was celebrating his wedding at the settlement's community hall. A weathered wooden building that served as the village's sole venue, the reception had spilled outside onto adjacent grounds, where long wooden tables were arranged beneath birch trees. A separate cooking area sat approximately 30 yards from the main tables, where several women prepared traditional dishes over open fires. Smoked fish, roasted game, and fresh bread had been cooking since early morning. The surrounding taiga had experienced a poor berry season, a late spring frost having devastated the wild blueberry and cranberry crops that bears relied upon for summer nutrition. Wildlife officials had noted increased bear activity near settlements throughout the summer, with garbage dumps and storage sheds raided in preceding weeks. The village itself had experienced a bear sighting along its perimeter road earlier that month, though the animal moved on without incident. Over 60 guests had gathered. The nearest law enforcement post was 40 miles away, and the village had no wildlife management presence. Several residents owned hunting rifles, but firearms were generally kept locked in homes rather than carried to social events. Brown bears are the largest terrestrial predators in the northern hemisphere, with adult males in the Krasnoyarsk region commonly exceeding 600 pounds. Their sense of smell is among the most powerful in the animal kingdom, capable of detecting food from over a mile away. Bears experiencing food scarcity become increasingly willing to approach settlements, and those that successfully obtain human food become food-conditioned, associating people with easy calories. A brown bear's strength is immense, capable of delivering paw strikes with over 1,200 pounds of force. Despite their bulk, they can sprint at over 30 miles per hour in short bursts. The bear that entered the settlement that evening was a mature male estimated at approximately 650 pounds, later identified by wildlife officials as an animal that had been reported near several properties in the region over the preceding month. The poor berry season had driven it progressively closer to human habitation. The attack began without warning at the cooking area. Yelena Sorokina, a 54-year-old village resident and aunt of the groom, had been working alone at the preparation station while the rest of the cooking staff had joined the main celebration to watch the toasts. Evidence suggested she had been transferring a large pot of stew from the fire to the serving table when the bear emerged from the birch grove less than 15 feet away. The bear struck Sorokina before she could react, a single massive paw swipe connecting with her upper body. The impact threw her sideways off her feet, the force fracturing multiple ribs and rupturing her spleen. The bear followed immediately, its jaws closing on her shoulder and upper arm, crushing bone and tearing through muscle. Based on the severity of her injuries, investigators determined Sorokina likely never regained consciousness after the initial blow. Evidence later indicated the attack lasted less than 30 seconds before the bear released her and began feeding on the scattered food from the overturned pot. Guests at the main tables heard the crash of the overturned cooking equipment, but initially assumed a table had collapsed. It was several minutes before a guest walking toward the cooking area spotted the bear hunched over the food and Sorokina's motionless body. His shouts sent the reception into a panic. The bear, startled by the sudden eruption of screaming, abandoned the cooking area and moved toward the main gathering. Guests scattered in every direction, overturning tables and chairs. Most fled toward the community hall or nearby houses. The bear moved through the reception area at a deliberate pace, not charging but not retreating, agitated by the noise but drawn forward by the overwhelming scent of food covering every table. The groom's older brother, a 37-year-old former military conscript, had run to a nearby house to retrieve a hunting rifle. Returning to the grounds, he found the bear standing among the overturned tables, feeding on spilled food. Rather than maintaining distance, he approached to within approximately 30 feet, attempting to get a clear shot in the fading daylight. The bear detected his approach and turned toward him. He fired once. The round struck the bear in the shoulder, penetrating muscle but failing to reach vital organs through the dense tissue and heavy bone. The wounded bear charged immediately, covering the distance with terrifying speed. He attempted to chamber a second round, but the bear was on him in less than 2 seconds. The initial impact knocked the rifle from his hands. The bear's jaws clamped onto his neck and shoulder, the crushing bite collapsing his collarbone and severing major blood vessels. The bear shook him once with violent force before releasing him and retreating several steps, blood streaming from its shoulder wound. The groom's brother collapsed where he fell, bleeding rapidly from the catastrophic neck wounds. The gunshot and the commotion had drawn other villagers with firearms. 2 more shots struck the bear as it moved away from the body, one hitting its hindquarters and the second striking its spine. The bear collapsed approximately 40 yards from the reception area, paralyzed but still alive. A final shot ended it. Sorokina was confirmed dead at the cooking area, her injuries having been immediately fatal. The groom's brother was still breathing when guests reached him, but the damage to his neck and shoulder had severed blood vessels that could not be controlled with improvised pressure. He lost consciousness within minutes and stopped breathing shortly after. The nearest emergency medical responders arrived over an hour later, long after both victims had died. The investigation confirmed the bear had been food conditioned through repeated successful raids on human food sources throughout the summer. Wildlife officials linked the animal to at least 4 prior incidents in the region. The poor berry season was cited as the primary driver of the bear's increasingly bold behavior around settlements. Chernikov buried his brother and his aunt in the days following the wedding, and the village implemented new food storage guidelines and requested permanent wildlife management support from regional authorities, though the nearest qualified officers remained stationed over 40 miles away. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now.